date as well. So as you'll see, and you've heard from Neil already, we've got a very packed, ambitious agenda this morning. But what we hope is that in the first hour to give you talks from 6 individual organisations, the AHSNs, Healthcare UK and ABHI. And between each of those, segue with an SME speaker that has experience of working with one or all of us on their export journey, and that's from Medovate, ORCHA and Virti. And just after that, we will all be automatically pulled into a few breakout groups, and that will give you an opportunity to sort of deep dive into any questions that you have from the more earlier sessions, but also perhaps give your lived experience, with the aim that we'll come back for a final couple of minutes, wrap up and close in a plenary session and be done by 11:30. So without further ado, I'm going to give a quick overview of the AHSNs, and for those less familiar, what we do, and then also how we have evolved and are continuing to develop our international support offer. So the AHSNs, we started in 2013. Funded by the NHS and the Office for Life Sciences, and we are the innovation arm of the NHS. And the vision is for the NHS to be a global leader in the uptake of innovation, and that's why we're all here today. We ultimately support the adoption and spread of approved, proven, innovative solutions into our health and care system, and as we'll hear, into health and care systems elsewhere as well. There are 15 AHSNs across England. We are geographically located and truly embedded within our health and care systems. So we truly understand what those clinical needs are within our regions, and therefore we can act as that interface between the system and industry partners such as yourselves to match those needs. And by working as a network of all 15 of us in a truly collaborative way, we can share that experience, our pooled intelligence, and really help to expedite that national spread and ultimately international spread for those where it's appropriate. So we're catalysts for innovation. We connect partners across all of the sectors of the health and care system. We create the right environment for change, and we are collaborators. And last financial year or preceding financial year, we do expect to have our numbers for the most recent financial year coming out soon, but you'll see over 2,500 companies were supported with significant jobs created and safeguarded, and that bottom right hand figure of in excess of £300 million investment leverage. So that's both an inward investment for UK PLC, but also helping those companies in their international sales. So how are we continuing and developing our international offer? This is work that's happening in real time, and today's event is one part of that. There's a number of scoping activities ongoing that we are conducting to pull that together and to make that even more cohesive, so that as and when we can get to those international conferences, if ever that is possible, that we can be supporting innovators such as yourself to get there. So enabling cohesion of some of our domestic programmes, and I've outlined what those acronyms are for those that aren't familiar, but particularly for the NHS Innovation Accelerator that is hosted at UCL Partners on behalf of the whole network, helping those cohorts of innovators expand internationally and expediting that. And facilitating increased number of NHS providers that may or may not be part of a domestic programme moving into those international markets through the contacts and the networks and the individuals presenting today. So what do we do and how are we developing our offer? So on the left-hand side, for the NHS providers, we're working incredibly closely with Healthcare UK, who you hear from today, to support them in helping the NHS and the clinical entrepreneurs to really export their innovations. I think also for industry and innovators that aren't from within the system, we have a pipeline, and all 15 of us have a national pipeline of innovations at every stage of product development. And so we can very readily identify those export-ready technologies. And then through that, both the coordinated and strategic approach, as well as our internal mentoring and innovation expertise, establishing two-way exchanges of knowledge and innovation, working with similar global institutions. And an example, very recent example, is contact in Australia, looking to set up an AHSN-like construct for their health and care system. And so again, there is this dual exchange of what we do here, and by building that knowledge of other healthcare systems, we can best match the innovations to land there, and vice versa, we can support other technologies that meet UK and NHS health and care challenges. I won't go into the next two case studies in detail, because you'll perhaps hear about those from some of our other speakers, but it's just to say that in 2019, the AHSN Network took 5 health tech innovators to Arab Health, and in collaboration with ABHI, hosted on the ABHI UK Pavilion. And all 5 of those companies generated valuable leads at that conference, and it also helped internally across the network, the AHSN network, to build our understanding of health systems outside of the UK, and really help bridge that gap. And then the second example is from the US, the UK Texas bridge with both ABHI and Department of International Trade. So recognising Texas as the second largest GDP in the US, and taking or co-leading delegations of UK companies and enabling them to meet with all of the different stakeholders within that particular economy, and with the aim and the intention that from Texas those companies will expand further into US markets. So I'm going to pause there. There's an awful lot there. Perhaps we can dig into a little bit more in the breakout sessions. But I think without further ado, I would like to hand over to Stuart Thomson from Medovate, who'll give you an example from the SME perspective. So Stuart, could I hand over to you? I'll control your slides, so just say next slide, please.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Louise, and hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Stuart Thomson, Managing Director of Medovate, and I'm going to take 10 minutes to talk you through our journey to international markets in the medical device field. So next slide, please, Lou. So Medovate is a dedicated medical device company, and our job is creating and commercialising medical devices that have come from the UK National Health Service and beyond. We were spun out of the National Health Service 3 years ago, in the back of 2017, and we closed investment from a London Stock Exchange listed investor and a US investor of high net wealth, to get our first technologies on the road through their development path to regulatory approval. Next slide, please, Lou. So our business model is that we find technologies from our NHS trusts in the region, in the country, that fit our portfolio and our specialities, and we will then license or assign those technologies into the company and generate value for all of our shareholders and the National Health Service by getting those products to regulatory approval and then launching them on the market. We can direct sell products ourselves engage with distributors, and at the right stage in time when our technologies are that, successful, I'm sure we'll get to the stage where large global medtech players will then be very interested to either buy those technologies or maybe even Medovate, but we'll see what the future brings. I would quite like to say that the NHS benefits from the Medovate business model in a number of distinct ways. So each technology that we take in from an NHS trust, that's on a commercial relationship, so that when we're successfully selling that product, royalties or other payments return back to the hospital and the innovators that have created that technology. But because we were also spun out of the National Health Service, our NHS partner has an equity holding within Medovate, that when that is realised, that equity holding will then be redistributed back to their 20 NHS members as well. So it's very much a cyclical business model that when Medovate's successful, the NHS will see returns also to hopefully generate more technologies that can then come forward and be very commercially successful. Next slide, please, Lou. Just want to give you an idea of some of the hospitals that we've been working with. We're based in Cambridge, just down the road from the Eastern AHSN and some of our very large trusts in the Eastern region. But we've also been working with London hospitals and further afield, and also with Susie and her team down at UCL Partners as well. From our point of view, we looked for technologies that are an early stage of development, that have some early proof of principle, not necessarily clinical data, but have been, a prototype that has some mannequin studies that we can then take into our portfolio. And Lou, if you could click onto the next slide. This is our portfolio as of today. So over the last 3 years, we've built up technologies in 3 key areas. So we have an anaesthesia division, which is where our first products have reached the market, that I'm going to tell you how we've internationalized those. We have a critical care division where we're looking at arterial line and airway products. And then last year, we took on a technology from Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge called Endovac, which is for endoluminal vacuum therapy of internal wounds of the GI tract. So that's our first foray into surgery. What I would say is, as Medovate is a company that has technical experts, business development experts, regulatory experts, and we work alongside our NHS clinicians in the Eastern region to really drive these technologies forwards. We are ISO 13485 accredited for all of our therapy areas through BSI, and the structure that we put together really allowed us to accelerate our first product to market. And I was going to tell you about that in the next slide. So next slide, please, Luke. So we have solved this problem. Now, if any of you have ever had a regional anaesthesia, which is where an anaesthetist will anaesthetise a portion of your body, such as your arm or your leg for surgery, it will be a 2-person procedure, that regional anaesthetic block. The anaesthetist, he or she, is holding an ultrasound probe with one hand and a needle with the other, and their job is to get the needle close to a nerve vesicle so that their assistant, which is the pair of hands on the syringe that you can see that in that picture, injects the anaesthetic around that nerve vesicle to anaesthetise your arm, your torso, your leg, whichever part of the body that they're anaesthetising. If you can just click forwards, Lou, please. However, there is a problem with this procedure, and that is if the assistant injects above 20 psi of pressure, you can cause serious nerve damage if the needle is too close to the nerve. Now, serious nerve damage is seen in around about 1 in 1,000 cases if you look at the published literature, but transient nerve damage, where the patient can come back into hospital for nerve conduction studies, is seen in about 8% of cases. It's why we've blindly measured over 100 trained anaesthetists and assistants now, and 40% routinely inject above 20 psi of pressure, and 20% inject routinely above 30 psi of pressure. So this is happening day in, day out around the world. We've solved this problem by creating Saphira, which stands for Safer Injection for Regional Anaesthesia. Next slide, please, Lou. And Saphira is that bit of kit you can see on the screen there, which is a driver that does 200 blocks, a foot pedal that does 200 blocks, and a single-use disposable syringe. This system allows the whole regional blocks to be carried out as a 1-person procedure, and it will never ever go above 20 psi of pressure, so that the hospital and the anaesthetist knows that they're doing the procedure safely. Now, we took this technology on in 2018, in the first year of our operation. 2 years later, in 2020, last year, during the pandemic, we achieved FDA 510K clearance, CE approval, Australia TGA approval, and New Zealand approval, and in December Israeli AMAR approval as well, which is brilliant because we're getting those regulatory approvals to be able to launch our products in those international markets. The job then was to actually launch those products in those international markets and choose the right partners to do so. So in 2021 so far, we have launched in those 4 main territories for human healthcare. We have partnered with a very large ultrasound company to co-promote our products in the regional anaesthesia space. And we've also launched our product into the veterinary field as well. So what works in humans can also work in animal health that have very sensitive nerves as well. Just push forward one little bit. We're getting great clinical feedback from our inventors around the world. And those socks you see in the bottom right-hand side of your screen are famous. They're from a consultant called Dr. Mornay Wolmerans, who works at the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital and is also a board member of the European Society of Regional Anaesthesia. He is not he wasn't involved in inventing the product, but he did want to be one of the first users of it, and found that he's allowing to use less anaesthetic in a more controlled manner when he's anaesthetising his patients, and is one of the great advocates for the device. One of my key take-home messages for you is find your clinical key opinion leaders that can help you launch your products around the world. It's very useful, and try and have some independence there from your innovators as well, because it can really add substantial evidence to your background. Next slide, please, Lee. So we have now concluded 9 distribution deals. We took the decision quite early on that we were a product development company and that we would have a sales and marketing director and business development managers that could help with our globalization of our products, but we weren't going to have a direct sales force given the overheads that came with it. And we thought that actually, even if we employed a direct sales force, we'd need it in different markets. And the best way for us is to partner with global players in our areas that have a sales force that can go out and sell our product. So we've partnered with 5 organisations in the US to give us 100% US coverage. We've partnered with a very large regional anaesthesia player called Vigon, who are based out of France, to give us European coverage. And then we've done distribution deals with Australia, and also Israel, and now also Kuwait. We've done a recent distribution deal with a company called Omnia Health that came through our links with ABHI and the AHSNs and our Arab Health attendance in 2019. My advice to you is that if you are going to choose distributors to sell your products, is to find the right distributor, someone who's going to really pay attention to your product, put your product at the top of their bag when they go out there to sell it to their clinical customers. Someone who's got a track history in your area, someone who's engaged. You may need to incentivize them in the right way in terms of margin or bonus structures in terms of their payments, but you want to get them out there, not just adding your product to their kit and putting it on a website. You physically want them out there selling your product with hospitals around the world, and that's what's proved to be quite successful in us in terms of choosing the right partners. Next slide, please, Lee. So on our journey, we're a very small company based out of Cambridge. We needed help. And we've received a number of support and help from the ABHI and DIT. So we are part of the US Accelerator program that ABHI run, and that's been great for us to get some good leads with Dell Medical School, and to get clinicians and understand the care pathways that are slightly different in the US to selling our regional anaesthesia product. It's been really helpful for us to engage with those decision makers so that we can put the right health economics data together and the right package to be able to sell our products in the US. And we've really learned a lot from that. We've also been successful and lucky to attain DIT and ABHI TAP awards to attend Medica and also Arab Health. These are awards that are open to SMEs, and if you've got the right qualifications in terms of the acceptance criteria, it part funds your attendance at those exhibitions that I do hope come back online in face-to-face in the near future. It was great for us to understand and meet new distributors that we've now got Omnia Health over the line with. And I would just also add that DIT were really helpful when we were trying to understand tariffs and import-export into different countries, understanding what codes and giving us access to import and export agents that could help our products through international ports is really helpful, because the last thing you want is it to get stuck in a port for a month or two when your customer's wanting it at the other in the other country. So having those smooth transfer pathways has been really good for us. Next slide, please, Luke. The AHSNs were really helpful and instrumental in us in our product development pathway. So Eastern AHSN, that we know really well, they are equity holders and funders of something called the MedTech Accelerator, that is a proof of concept funding platform that some of the technologies that we've taken on went through, such as Saphira and Glucosave and Endovac. So we're picking those technologies up after it's had that early proof of concept work. The AHSNs offer innovation accelerator programs and navigator programs. For us, the real benefit was being able to sit down with clinical leaders, and when we wanted to find independent clinicians to test our products, understand they were working in the right way. The AHSNs facilitated those contacts so that we could engage with those clinicians, both through the Eastern AHSN and UCL partners, which are our closest to, and that was really helpful because we get that independent verification through different hospitals, different clinicians to add to our technical files for regulatory approval. And I would say the AHSNs do pick up on some of our good news stories and help us promote that through their partners as well, which is really helpful. Next slide, please, Lee. This is my last slide. I'm just overrunning my 10 minutes, so apologies. We were asked to say where we are now. So Medovate is at a stage where we have our first product launched in international territories, and we're generating revenue from that. Our plan now is to expand our first product, Sophia, into the Middle East, launch Sophia into our veterinary field. I'm very pleased to say that we had a press release went out yesterday where we've actually anaesthetised a lion that had dental surgery with Sophia, and it's not every day you get to anaesthetise a lion. So we're quite proud of that achievement. We're about to hopefully launch our product into Australia and also into America for veterinary use as well. We don't want to be a one product company, so we have our next products coming down the line that we're hopefully going to go through clinical trials and launch back end of this year, beginning of next. And our next plan is to capitalise the business and take on many more projects in our areas. So thank you, and thank you for listening.
Great, sorry, I wasn't sure if I was unmuted. So I will now hand over to Hassan.
Thank you so much, Louise, and a big thank you to the AHSN Network for the invite. Congratulations to Medovate for all of the great success that they've shown. In my 10 minutes, I'd like to tell you about an open secret called HealthCare UK. You may not have heard of this organisation. I hadn't before I joined them 2.5 years ago, and what support you can get in this wonderful ecosystem. And it is important to note that this is an ecosystem. These are not separate players. These are all organisations that work hand in glove to do the best for UK PLC. So if you wouldn't mind, Louise, next slide, please. If you look to the very left of that slide, this is deliberately, I got the old logos. HealthCare UK is a team within the Department for International Trade that is part funded by the Department of Health Social Care and by NHS England. And you'll notice that the logos, I've put the old ones in just to show how long that relationship's been going. The reason why we've got that additional badge and additional funding is because we support the NHS to export. And that's been a controversial topic for many years, but there's not enough money in the system. So one of the things we encourage the NHS to do is to go and get revenue and use its reputation and its reach. And we also support SMEs, both outward, which we call trade, and coming in, which we call investment. And it's important that you hold on to that jargon because I'm going to use it occasionally. So trade is out, investment is in. Now, what does HealthCare UK actually do? What does the DIT actually do? It has a team in London at Whitehall, as all government departments do, but it's got more than 109 countries around the world with British embassies, high commissions and consulate generals, and they all have commercial teams. Those commercial teams are looking for opportunities for British companies. You typically won't find specialists within those areas. So someone working in Kuwait, for example, and I'll mention Gula here, who's amazing. Gula looks after food and drink, but has also been doing HealthTech. So you know that Gula will be able to fight for you, get connections for you, but you might have to explain what a digital therapeutic is. And that's what happens when you speak to the network across the world. The simpler you make your message, the easier it is for them to take to sophisticated buyers, almost as if you need to be like a schizophrenic and give two different answers of what you are. And with all of those networks, with all of those people across the world, as they try and support you, the messages will come back to Whitehall, to HealthCare UK, and to support the teams, which is the right-hand side. What do? We increase the UK share of the global healthcare market and act as a bridge. Louise, next slide, please. So lots and lots of objectives. You'll notice that we facilitate government to government. So I've got a call with the health service executive for Ireland. And in my conversation, I'm going to be picking some companies to say, I think these are the ones you should be working with. You know, part of our role is to put the right companies on the radar, but we also For example, we were speaking to AstraZeneca in Singapore, and they were very interested in what technology that we had that would fit their needs. And there's an element here of push and pull. Sometimes different parts of the world need something, and it's very difficult to know that from sitting in the UK. But once you've spoken to them, spoken to buyers and governments and ministries of health, they'll give you what they're pulling, and then you can match. And other times we will just push. We will just put lots of great British companies into a set of press releases and even pay money to put them into the media in countries to really promote them. So there's lots of things happening. And all of the services that we provide at HealthCare UK are free. Next slide, please. I'm going to have to speed up. There's a lot of slides. So lots and lots of different organizations. The thing that I've deliberately missed out on this slide is that we don't do business development. There's no state aid here. We're not giving you an unfair advantage against the other commercial services that you get in other countries. But as much as possible, we're supporting the UK supply chain. We're trying to publicize specific opportunities. And to the example given just before me on distributors, one thing that the DIT can do is tell you who we don't trust in country and who we do trust. And that doesn't mean we know everybody in country, although in some countries they're small enough for you to know everybody. And it is always worth knowing. And one thing that I want to make clear, it's not mandatory for anyone to export using the DIT services. Please don't take this message the wrong way. But in some countries, it's politically sensitive, and you'd much rather that the British Embassy knew that you were in country in case there was a chance of overlap with other things that they were planning. So that not relevant at all in Texas, but perhaps relevant on the island of Montserrat. And these are the kind of things that are worth knowing about. If you wouldn't mind, next slide, please. So trusted partners, and we've got lots and lots of organizations that I could have listed, but I'd like to single out the AHSN Network and the ABHI for particular praise. I think it's important to note that companies can come to, for example, my good friend Vincent in Trinidad and Tobago had a company come to him and say they were experts in digital transformation. They had great clinical backgrounds. And so Vincent asked me about them and I said, never heard of these guys. And it turned out they had no NHS customers. They'd never done anything in the UK. They'd just gone out to that part of the world and said they were brilliant. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for proven technologies, those who are part of the UK DNA, part of the UK story. And to me, any organization that comes from the AHSN Network or the ABHI is already trusted. And that's important to note that this is a network that we all support each other. There are others I could have put in there, the European Connected Health Alliance, there's Scottish Development International. There are lots of organizations out there, but if you are part of the UK story, if you're already working with the NHS, or as in Medovate's example, you've spun out of the NHS, then you're very likely to get a warm reception. One thing to note, and this is important, sorry to finish this last slide. Imagine that you have a commercial officer sitting in Colombia. They have no idea what the real goings on in the NHS are. And you come along to them and say that you're working with Guy's and St Tommy's, you're working with Papworth, you're working with Addenbrooke's, you're working with the Christie. You've got the track record. They're going to then feel much more reassured and comfortable using their connections to get you in. And remember that these people, they don't want to burn those connections. They want to make sure they use them in the right way. So the more credible you are, if you've got Innovate UK funding as an example, those are things that are plus points for you. Thank you so much, Louise, if you wouldn't mind. Next slide, please. This is just to say that digital health has become front of mind for everybody for various reasons. But the main thing is that no healthcare system in the world is really sustainable unless we rely on digital. And therefore, people have woken up to that fact. Next slide, please. I can point to many issues that have been exposed across the world. The key elements, though, are that now we're pushing at open doors. So if you're able to point, for example, PEP Health are able to point to patient experience, those are the kind of things that you want to point to, and people are going to be much more aware of those things. Next slide, please. Now, you'll notice in the what now that this feels like I've cribbed it from the NHS long-term plan. But it is true that a lot of what we're talking about in the UK fits what you may think of as the visions 4 different countries. And I've seen so many of them, and they feel like they've all been copied from each other. You know, I've seen the draft one for Pakistan as an example, and I thought, I swear that looks like the Philippine one. They're all roughly saying the same things. And I went to Saudi before COVID on a trade mission, and the Saudis admitted quite openly, yeah, I think we are using the NHS long-term plan. They call them clusters rather than ICSs, but everyone is thinking about place-based care. They're thinking about the emphasis to prevention, to citizen self-care. So the exact agendas that you follow in the UK are likely to be very, very powerful for you. We haven't quite got to health inequalities yet across the world, but those are the kind of things that you can see coming. Next slide, please. So I'd like to speak a little, and I'm generalizing, but I'd like to speak a little about opportunities by region to give you some idea of what's going on in the world. You will have your own biases. You will think, oh, I'm sure this will work. Before I begin, I'll just say that a lot of companies, they say to me, oh, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, because they think that will be similar enough to the UK, English speaking, culturally similar, that will be good for us. And then they turn up to Canada and they realize that each province does things differently, and it's so fragmented that they can't get anywhere. And it's also really, really big. So these are the kind of problems that you need a little bit of inside information sometimes to make the right choice on your market. So Louise, next slide, please. So let's have a look at Brazil. And I've got lots and lots of points I can make on Brazil, and I won't read them out. But the big thing is that we often say that the NHS is the world's oldest universal healthcare system, and we sometimes say it's the biggest. The Brazilians would say no, that's not true. We've got you beat. And if you look through the second bullet point, you'll see that their public health system accounts for about 3/4 of their 210 million population. And it's important to note that they have a community health worker model, CHW, which should have been great for them in COVID, but they have absolutely trashed their COVID response. It's not worked at all for them. And Brazil also hasn't managed to get over the telemedicine regulation issues. So there's lots of arguments about how to implement telemedicine, which means it hasn't really got going. So while there's lots of opportunity because of the size of the market, you would call that slightly immature as a digital health market. And it's possible for you to go in with something that isn't as sophisticated, but it's got to be rugged, got to be robust, got to be at scale. And it's got to be the kind of thing that doesn't trigger the kind of telemedicine regulation issues that you might find if you're in that space. And they're very interested in augmenting their staff in the field and training at scale. Now, if you think about that kind of background, that's what you get because you've got commercial officers in country who know the lay of the land, who know the players, who can connect you. They can't do the business development for you, but they can put you in touch and they can accelerate you and nudge things along once you've had your go. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Singapore. Singapore is incredible.
Sorry, Hassan. I was just going to say we've got literally 2 minutes, if that's okay, just to give everybody else airtime. So apologies for that.
Oh, no, not at all. I could speak for a few hours. And so Singapore, I'll just say very briefly, you're never going to make a lot of money in Singapore. You'll do brilliantly if you've got a sophisticated solution, but Singapore really is your launching pad into Southeast Asia. Getting into Singapore is important and you need to have some very sophisticated tech to stand out. But Singapore is not a place where you're going to get big deals, not unless you manage to get the private sector. And even then, they'll push you towards Indonesia and other places. So I'll stop some of the country profiles just to give you an idea. There's lots of information that we can give you, lots of support we can give you. But the goal that you have when you work with the DIT is to be close to the commercial officers in country, in post. And those are the ones closest to the ground who know what's going on. They can support you. I've got 2 slides that I'd like to just point to very quickly. We won't have to go through it if that's okay, Louise. It's what do we look for? If you like to move on, that's great. Here, if you can't tell us at the DIT that these are all part of what you do, then there's going to be an issue. For example, do you have senior level buy-in in your company about international expansion? And are you responsive? Now, unfortunately, I'm the hardest person to get hold of. I'm 2 days a week at the DIT. But if someone comes up with a great opportunity for you and it takes you 2 months to reply, and that keeps happening, there's going to be a problem where commercial officers just won't put you forward. So being responsive is important. I'll stop at that point just to say the support of DIT with all of the other organizations that you can find, including ABHI and AHSN Network, is valuable as much as you put into it. And I hope we get to work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hassan. And I will just now skip to Hassan's contact details are there, but I will now move over to Liz, representing another of our SMEs, so from ORCHA. So Liz, would you like to take it away?
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to join today. As with the other speakers, there's so much that I could say. What I've tried to do for this next 10 minutes is give you a little bit of insight into what ORCHA do, and then share with you where we started and our top lessons learned, in the hope that you can save yourself some time. So the first thing just to say is what is ORCHA? So ORCHA actually stands for the Organisation for the Review of Care and Health Apps, and we're most well known because we review and approve digital health solutions. However, our mission isn't to review. Our mission is to get high quality digital health to improve lives. And when we started just 6 years ago, literally I've just had my 6-year anniversary, the ambition was always one which was a global ambition. And what we're trying to do is make sense of the landscape of digital health, so that healthcare systems, healthcare payers and providers, healthcare professionals and patients can understand which tools are high quality and which ones will meet their needs. And basically, if you think about the current position, the current marketplace of digital health on a global scale, there's over 365,000 digital health products. Our research has found that only 20% meet the quality criteria. And if you take a step back and think, if this was a situation for drugs and medications, we'd be in a bit of a mess, and that's where we are at the moment with digital health. So ORCHA's ambition was to try and make sense of that landscape and support different parts of the system to better enable people to get the benefits from these solutions. Next slide, please. Now, the barriers that we started with the ambition of breaking down with these 4 big barriers. Just very quickly, the biggest barriers to the adoption of digital health is awareness. People don't know that these solutions exist. Access, where do you go to find them? Trust, people don't trust these solutions, and ongoing risk management. And on the next slide, you can see how we break down those barriers, because we're building trust by reviewing and approving. We're then activating healthcare systems through that robust review process to have access to digital health technologies through digital health libraries, which are created as a nation or as a region or as an organisation and promoted to people. Within that activate area as well, what we do is we have the prescription for digital health technologies. So in the same way that healthcare professionals prescribe drugs, then they use our digital health libraries as a formulary to recommend or prescribe digital health solutions to patients and people. And we also have the underpinning governance, which is any future risk management. And what we did when we first started was we really wanted to get this right here in the UK with the NHS. My background is an NHS clinician. A lot of people from within ORCHA had come from the NHS, and so we really wanted to get this right for the NHS. But as I said right at the beginning, if you read my initial business plan for ORCHA, you would see that it was a global ambition, and it continues to be so. So where are we now? So we started 6 years ago, and we started in the NHS. And over the last 6 years, we've started to expand, and we're currently in 4 continents across Europe, the Middle East, North America and Australasia. And we have over 40 million citizens coverage using our solutions, thousands of healthcare professionals. We've reviewed over 13,000 digital health technologies, and we support 36 languages. So where did we start? So on the next slide, thank you. So it's quite tricky actually. You have this ambition, and of course you have this huge vision and mission that you really want to achieve, but how do you actually start that journey? Well, I think that probably the best decision that we made was really trying to, as Hassan indicated, getting it right in this country first, really having a proven technology that worked well here. And then when you start to think about internationalization, the first thing to think about is really be focused and targeted. The world is a massive place, and what happens is that you open up the doors to an international opportunity, and you might start to be inundated with people coming forward. So you need to start with a very clear focus and target. And we decided that we were going to start with the Netherlands. So this was about a year before Brexit actually happened, and so we decided that we wanted to start in Europe. We wanted to start in the Netherlands. The reason we wanted to start in the Netherlands was because they'd already started a similar journey to try and break down those barriers that I mentioned, and they'd also felt the pain of trying to do it as a country, and had tried a number of different things that hadn't worked. And they also had a budget, and they also had a very clear policy direction. So the Netherlands was decided as a place for us to start to focus on for our first export. And what we did was the next thing, which is we needed to stop before we started. So we invested quite a bit of time in doing our research, making sure that country was ready for the solution and the opportunity. And then what we did was we learned about the healthcare system. So again, Hassan was going through some of the really interesting and helpful information about those different healthcare systems. Each healthcare system is slightly different, and you have to learn before you start to export there, because you need to think about how are things structured, what are the incentives and what are the disincentives, and all of those things need to be aligned, because you can spend a lot of time having nice conversations but not actually getting anywhere. What we then did was we then made sure that our value proposition was aligned to all of that learning that we'd taken on board. We made sure that our solution was aligned with their structure, their incentives. Consideration of your business model may also need to be taken into account. Once we had our value proposition, we then did a lot of work around who do we need to target. So we did a lot of stakeholder mapping at a very granular level, not just at organisational level. And we heard earlier on, you know, finding the key influencers in the country and making sure that they're aware of what you're trying to do, and be really clear about who you're going to target, when are you going to target, and what's the message that you want to land with those individuals. The next thing is you then need to build your network. So what I did was I took a week, and the DIT were just phenomenal. I was given a chap who was a chap called Frazo in the Netherlands, who helped me for 3 full days, taking me to different conferences, taking me to different parts of the system, to hospitals, to universities, meeting with other innovators. It was really amazing 3 days, and by the end of it I felt that I had really started to build my network in that country. And then after you've built your network, it's about starting to market and communicate with that network, about raising awareness and engaging that network in what you're trying to do. So there's quite a lot of prep work that you need to go through before you even start that journey. Next slide, please. And it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So it can feel like you're drowning because there's a lot to do. It's, you know, I've not even touched on any, you know, data storage, regulations, compliance. There's a lot of things to do. But there is some amazing support, and I am always continuously amazed at the support that Hassan commented is freely available. Literally, it's free to access, and it is so valuable. So, I mean, the Department for International Trade, I mean, Hassan himself has been like a mentor to me and ORCHA, but also through the Department for International Trade, not just in this country, but in other countries. You know, they've provided us with opportunities for introductions to validated opportunities. They've supported us with promotion. They've supported us by helping to raise awareness of what we're trying to do. They've supported with that knowledge and insights and engagement. And they've been a real broker for us, because if they introduce us and then we're able to have a conversation, they can then have a softer conversation and say, how did it go? What did you think? And we've also been very fortunate to get into the Digital Health Playbook, which is supported by the Department for International Trade, which is the first 100 companies that are promoted from the UK DIT, and Hassan's led that. So it's been phenomenal, and I would advise anybody to get in touch with the DIT to get that support. The ABHI, so Lou touched on the pavilion that was run at Arab Health, and with the AHSN and the ABHI, we were in that pavilion, and that gave us a really amazing launch pad into the Middle East. And the AHSNs have supported us right from day one to really establish ourselves within this country and then support that as a launch pad into other countries. And we're part of the NHS Innovation Accelerator, which is supported by the AHSN Network and predominantly through the UCL partners. And that has really been amazing to be part of and get that support both within this country and then a launch pad for international development. Okay, next slide, and I think this might be my last one. So these are my key lessons learned. Start with your qualification and disqualification criteria. The world is a big place, so be really clear about who you want to work with and who you don't want to work with. And our criteria started with the country that we wanted to go to has to understand the problem that we solve, and ideally has felt some of the pain of that problem, so that they're really well aligned with what our solution does. There has to be a budget, because obviously it's difficult if there isn't, and having your solution aligned with their strategy and national policy is really important too, because then you can explain the impact and the alignment to what they're trying to do. And that then brings me on to our next key lesson learned: align your solution to the needs of the country you're wanting to export to. Of course, knowing that you've worked with the NHS is really powerful, but then you need to just make sure that you pivot what you do to align to what they need. Another key lesson: be patient. It's not a fast process, so give yourself runway. Don't expect to land a deal within 3 months. For us, it takes somewhere between 6 to 12 months, and 6 months has been fast, and that's because of the COVID situation and being able to have repeated conversations online rather than having to travel as much. Be tenacious, don't give up. You will get more knockbacks than anything else, so keep trying. And the other thing that we found really powerful is finding a demonstrator site. So we don't use the word pilot, we use demonstrator. So find a demonstrator site to prove that the technology works in that country. And then the final key lesson is just make sure that there is some business to be done, because otherwise it can just end up in a long line of nice conversations. I'll happy to support anybody if you want an offline conversation. You can email me at those contact details there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Liz. That's great. I think in the interest of time, we'll move straight over to Paul from ABHI. So Paul.
Thank you. Thanks. Great. Thank you for inviting me today. Great to speak to you. I'll try and get through my piece at a bit of a canter just to try and keep us on time. So if I kick off, just put, if it's all right to put the first slide up, that would be fabulous. Brilliant. Thank you. So my name's Paul Benton. I head up ABHI's international division. ABHI, if you're not familiar with this, stands for the Association of British HealthTech Industries, and we're the UK's leading health technology trade association. And when we talk about health technology, obviously we're describing the sector in its broadest sense, so everything from medical devices to diagnostics, digital health, of course the lines between which are all increasingly blurring, but fundamentally our 300 member companies that we represent range from large both large multinationals through to UK SMEs, and arguably we have a very large and long tail out into the SME community. They all share a common purpose, of course, which is to provide products and services that enhance and save lives. And our role at ABHI really is to support our member community to do just that, as well as, of course, contributing to key government policy initiatives that improve both the health and wealth of the UK. So we do that through expert advice in critical areas such as regulation, market access, procurement and trade, and of course the latter of which I'm talking a little bit about today. We have a very senior leadership team, all boast a lot of experience, contemporary industry experience and deep connections into government and the NHS. And we run events, we provide intelligence and networking opportunities to our members, as well as all of the other good stuff that you might come to expect from industry associations. But it's really the international work that I obviously wanted to talk a little bit about today. So next slide, please. That'd be great. Thanks. So the health tech sector, as we all know, is dominated by small and medium-sized businesses, and our membership really does reflect that. As I say, 80% or so of our members are SMEs, and with that comes the challenges and opportunities associated with running small businesses, and being able to successfully export can be a crucial part of any kind of SME's success. But having the right platforms to do that, knowing exactly where to turn for advice and guidance can often be the difference between success and failure. And so knowing what help is out there, where to find it, as it says on this slide, is half the battle. So there are a number of bodies like ourselves that have dedicated international departments and so on where they can support. You've heard from Hassan and heard the other companies talk about the support that's available from government, and absolutely I would suggest that companies do engage with Department for International Trade, their networks both on the ground in the UK through their international trade advisor colleagues and so on that are based regionally, but also through, as Hassan mentioned earlier, the commercial officers who are based in the different consulates and embassies around the world. They're a really great resource to tap into. And of course, we work very closely with bodies like the AHSNs, who play a really key role in connecting the UK's business community. All of which I think, as has been described before, it's a sort of symbiotic relationship, I think, between all of our organisations in supporting that agenda. But also, I would say, just don't forget about other sources. Do look to engage with foreign embassies, many of those based in the UK, many of those that you can reach out, in market. Do look at chambers of commerce. Do look at the economic development agencies in different regions. All of these organisations are set up to help companies in market and can be a really valuable tool for supporting your sort of market entry. So next slide, please. Brilliant. So just to give you a flavour of ABHI support specifically, so our work is split into 4 pillars in our international division. So there's our policy work, whereby we utilise our expertise and that of our member companies to input into key government policy initiatives. At ABHI, we have a couple of dedicated working groups that help with that, specifically around the international agenda, and they're really a really useful vehicle for helping shape and position our interactions with government, both in the UK and those overseas, and a really important tool for us in terms of trying to raise and tackle market access barriers in key parts of the world. In this it's an increasing area of importance to us, and certainly as the UK looks to strike free trade agreements in different jurisdictions. So, for example, just last week we signed an MOU with ABIMED, the Brazilian HealthTech trade body, which mirrors ongoing UK and Brazilian trade discussions and also allows to align on key areas such as regulation and sustainability, as well as working to establish mutual opportunities for companies in our respective networks. Which bleeds a little bit into our third pillar on this slide, so our market intelligence and network. So Peter Ellingworth, our CEO, sits on Liz Truss's expert life sciences advisory panel within DIT, and I have the pleasure of chairing the healthcare and life sciences working group for the trade investment APPG. So there's a tremendous amount of activity that we do on behalf of companies in terms of shaping the trade environment, and there are also some very specific activities which we open up to the wider health tech community, not just our members. So on that, we'll go to the next slide, please. Brilliant. So on those initiatives, one which is really important to us is our US Accelerator program, and heard that referenced a little bit earlier with Medovate, and who are part of that program, and I'm sure you'll hear from a few others later. So the US is by some way the largest market for health tech in the world, and so being able to bring high quality health tech to patients in the US is a real burning ambition for many UK businesses. It goes without saying, though, that of course it's a very competitive market, and if you don't have the right market entry strategy, it can be incredibly costly and time consuming, and it's with that in mind that was really the genesis for our starting our US Accelerator program, which is really all designed around supporting companies to enter and upscale their activities in the US by giving them help and support, and also a platform through different activities to be able to really grow in the market in a sustainable way. So to aid us with that, we've a partnership in place with Dell Medical School, with the University of Texas in Austin. Members of our US Accelerator program are able to benefit from physical space. We have a sort of touchdown and landing zone there, but most importantly, they have access to the incredible network of clinicians and researchers based at Dell Med, and also their partner health system, which is Ascension. So from there, it's often a great springboard for other states and regions in the US, and wrapped around this sort of core support of ABHI working with each company, and also the innovation team at Dell Medical School doing that needs assessment with each company and supporting and helping them move from A to B. And we also provide a whole range of sort of wraparound support. We have nearly 100 mentors across the US, experts that are able to offer their expertise and guidance in regulation, in technology appraisal, reimbursement, also clinical leaders who are able to support, and we really utilize that network that we have there to try and build that kind of support and handhold companies as they go on their US journey. In normal times, we would lead our US Accelerator cohort on what is usually multiple trade missions to the US each year, where we visit different key states, we visit different cities, and sort of offer that speed dating and introduction to senior leaders from different health systems, from payers, from GPOs, and so on. But for obvious reasons, given the pandemic, that physical activity has been paused. But obviously, we're very hopeful that as we move into the latter part of this year, we might be able to sort of start to re-establish a rhythm to that. However, we've temporarily transitioned to a rolling program of virtual activities. So we have a weekly learning series with webinars and experts. We've run full trade missions and so on via that sort of virtual nature. Which again, all of which have been really successful. So we're currently helping 30 businesses on an annual basis as part of that US Accelerator cohort, and I'm very happy to talk a bit more about that in a bit more detail offline as we go. So just in the interest of time, I'll go to the next slide and keep moving on. That's great. So I mentioned the limitations of it just then around travel that COVID brought, which partially was the genesis really for this next initiative that I want to talk about, which is the UK Healthcare Healthcare Pavilion. So having been involved in the industry obviously for some time, we realise that there's never really been a single front door that showcases the breadth and the depth of the industry and the capabilities that we have here in the UK. And I'm talking here about being able to find in one place the companies that make up the sector, as well as the clinicians, the hospitals, the clinics, the regional accelerators, devolved nations, government bodies, and so on. Everybody that really helps to make up that UK healthcare and life sciences ecosystem, and really makes the UK such a sort of global powerhouse. So the partnering platform that we have created acts very much as a front door for UK PLC, for those visitors from around the world that want to look at and understand, you know, what we have here to offer in the UK, and to connect with companies. Companies are able to have a virtual listing on the UK Healthcare Pavilion, and there are a range of options that companies can take out to boost your presence across the site. But the way to think about the site is it's a bit of a mix between a sort of BBC News-esque style website for the healthcare and life sciences sector, mixed with, I suppose, Rightmove ultimately for the industry. So the ability to have a listing and so on, and stay connected. The platform's been promoted through DIT, through all of the consulates and embassies globally. As well as all of many of the other sort of domestic stakeholders and international stakeholders that are supporting, so the likes of the Royal Colleges. Delighted that the AHSN Network are involved in that. DIT, of course, are on there, you know, with a good presence. So we're really excited by the possibilities that the platform has to offer, and we already have several hundred companies that are registered that are on there. And there's also a range of interviews with key opinion leaders, news, as I say, from stakeholders, key industry figures, and so on. So really, it's an opportunity for visitors around the world to get under the skin of what UK PLC has to offer. So so again, I'm very happy to talk a little bit more about that offline, but we'll move to the next slide, please, if that's all right. And then finally, and again, you heard it mentioned, I think just in the presentation before, we also have our traditional pavilion offerings. So, you know, we're really hopeful that these will kickstart again as we come towards the end of this year and through next year. Obviously, quite badly affected by the sort of hiatus induced by the pandemic. But but you know, we're very hopeful that these will start to come back very strongly. It's something that we've been doing for the last 20 years. And we're very passionate about, and in that we deliver the ABHI UK Pavilion, as I say, at some of the largest trade shows and biggest trade shows, including Arab Health in Dubai, Medica in Düsseldorf in Germany, and CMEF in Shanghai, to name really just a few. Concepts are fairly straightforward, in that companies join our UK Pavilion, our UK group, and they have a stand package and a presence and so on, an ability to be there. But as part of that, you also get, you know, the heightened visibility that comes as being part of a UK group under the national flag, working with DIT, working with the AHSNs, and all of the support that come, an activity that gets wrapped around that. So the ability to engage with partnering opportunities, attend receptions, networking receptions, market visits to key customers, those types of things that all kind of run in and around the show, that the PR that is put on to really help promote the companies within the group and so on. And at Arab Health, for example, we also put on a very large surgical simulation program on our stand. So we build an operating theatre, we have equipment and demonstrations with key clinicians, you know, using cutting edge technologies, all of which is designed to really kind of showcase the strength and capabilities that we have in the UK, and to really highlight the technology solutions that are such a huge enabler to better quality care. So it helps companies to broker new business in those markets. And we're really looking forward, as I say, to getting back to that international stage later this year with Medica in November. And finally, we're very excited also in that to have a new addition to the calendar in that way this year domestically, which is we're going to have a pavilion presence and surgical simulation feature at the Royal College of Surgeons Future of Surgery event in London in the autumn. The RCS approached us around having seen what we do at Arab Health, and we're working very closely with them to put that together. So again, again, if anybody's interested in any of those shows or any of those opportunities, then we'd be delighted to sort of talk a bit more about all of that. But in the interest of time, I think with that, I will I'll pause, say thank you very much for listening. Very happy to talk in more detail in the breakout sessions that I know are coming up, and I will hand back. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. And I think just bringing us home, hopefully, to the breakout sessions will be Alex from Virti. So Alex, could I hand over to you? And audience, if you could think of some questions ready for the breakout sessions.
Thanks, Louise, and thanks to the AHSN Network and Susie and everyone for the invite today. And always a pleasure to follow Paul from ABHI in any presentation. So, Luke, if you could just skip to the next slide and stay on this one for a sec. So, yeah, my name's Alex Young. I'm a trauma and orthopaedic surgeon, originally training in the Southwest. I left my clinical role around about 3 years ago to launch Virti in 2018. Really on a mission to transform how people in any workforce learn, train and perform. And as you can imagine, over the last 12 months, with everything that's happened with remote work and remote training, we've scaled up very, very quickly. And that's in part thanks to a number of our partners who are on this call today, who we've had really good experiences with. So lest I forget to thank anyone, I think one thing just to say to anyone on the call is do engage and utilise the resources that have been made available to you that you've heard already, at length on this webinar from everyone within the AHSNs, within ABHI, within the Department for International Trade, and lots of these other NHS arm's length bodies, which are really there to kind of help and support companies as they scale. Next slide, please, Luke. So just kind of give you a quick overview about what we do, and then I'm going to jump in and try and get us on time for the breakout sessions, giving some learning points along the way. So as I mentioned, sort of traditional training very much relies on either things like this, which are webinars, which are quite didactic with all of us talking at you, or certainly when I was doing surgery or training in the NHS, really the sort of best way to learn was to be stood across an operating table or in a clinic, learning from real life clinical encounters and then reflecting on that with advice from colleagues. However, that latter component is quite subjective, quite serendipitous, depending on what day of the week you're in a hospital or in a work environment. And often if you're not remembering those skills, they'll be lost. So Luke, if you hit the next slide button. So this little animation reminds me that this is our mission. So really at Virti, what we wanted to do was transform how education in any sector is really provided to employees, and making experiential, i.e. on-the-job training, affordable and accessible for everybody on the planet. Next slide. And so in healthcare, that's particularly close to hopefully all of our hearts, because from some data which was published in the BMJ back in 2006, avoidable errors, which are often due to mistakes by medical professionals for a number of different reasons, are actually one of the biggest causes of avoidable death in Western healthcare. Certainly over the last sort of 12 months, it's come to even more the forefront. But if your workforce is not particularly well trained or feels underprepared or is being stretched in what they're being asked to do, that will lead to stress and burnout. And all of this then leads to significant costs to organisations. So, for example, in the United States, it costs around about 2.7 billion to train up all of their health professionals, regardless of people in other sectors. And there's a huge amount of spent on things like complaints, which can be attributed to poor communication skills, which again is really sort of a function of how we're training our people and training others. And the stats kind of at the bottom really are things that you probably all already know, which is unless you're practicing things regularly, you will forget them. And a lot of people are sort of dissatisfied with the current mechanisms of learning and training. And so really at Virti, what we set out to do was build an innovative system that made subjective data like communication skills or leadership skills or things that are very, very important to anyone in any organisation, and try and really sort of standardize that and quantify that. And we did that with some deep technology like AI, AR and VR. Next slide, please, Luke. And so just to, as a sort of a break point there, just to sort of jump, back to really sort of the focus of this webinar. That was kind of quite a big goal when I had that concept and took the leap to leave and go full time on Virti in 2018. I completely agree with everything that's sort of been said in the webinar so far, but we went a little bit of a different route. So yes, we did start off within the NHS, validating our product, which I'll talk a little bit about the importance of that in a second. But in terms of our trajectory, we really set the US as our kind of actual initial target market from a very, very early stage. That was partly because I'd had a few other businesses in the healthcare education sector were at the end of sort of, my sort of focus on them. About 75% of the revenue was coming from the United States. And so that was always going to be a real focus for us at Virti. So what we ended up doing there was we were very, very fortunate in that we got onto, I think it was the second or third year of the Digital Health London programme, which again is provided by the AHSNs. That was in 2018. That gave us a real good insight into some of the problems in terms of deployment and connections around wider hospital systems within the NHS in the UK. We then actually quite quickly looked at internationalization, and one of the things that I did as a founder of a team of about 4 people back towards the end of 2018 was jump onto what was the precursor to what is now the ABHI's US Accelerator that Paul just mentioned. And this was basically a trade mission going around Texas specifically, actually. And there was also a big push at the time for the Department of International Trade, looking at Texas in particular as a landing site for healthcare companies. And that's because the Texas Medical Center is one of the largest focused areas for healthcare systems on the planet. So we went around Houston, we went around Austin, and I think Dallas for that trip with Paul, his team, and a number of other SMEs. And really just through conversations, through introductions to C-suite level executives who, I had some connections in my network, but ABHI and the DIT connections we were able to leverage really opened up some deep conversations there, which then gave me a heck of a lot of confidence as a founder to say, we know that people want to buy our product just from this, sort of 4 or 5 day trade mission. We're going to go full force here. And quite sort of serendipitously, and I think one of my bits of advice to anyone on this call is always just try things and just do it. And one of the things that we did quite early on, having had some pre-seed investment back in sort of the end of 2018 from some investors on the West Coast of the US, was we applied to the Texas Medical Center's innovation program, and at the same time we also graduated in Digital Health London and got onto the National Innovation Accelerator, which again is part of the AHSNs. And also around that time we picked up an SBRI bit of sort of funded research around the platform for patient education. So at that time, I remember a couple of people telling me that we were one of the sort of fastest companies to go through DHL, NIA and the SBRI, and certainly the only education company to do so. So we really utilised a lot of those NHS resources and leveraged them when we were going into the US through the Texas Medical Center. We then picked up a lot of customers through 2019. We did a seed investment with actually Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles investing in us at that stage to help us build out a team in the United States. We incorporated the company as an Inc. In the US, which was really exciting for me. That was the first time I'd had a US incorporated company as a founder. And then we sort of worked with a lot of partners in the DIT, a lot of Hassan's colleagues, looking at sort of a state-by-state attack within the US through 2019 and 2020 when COVID hit. And so we ended up actually picking up some quite significant customers on the West Coast, in New York and in Texas, probably against my initial plan, which was to sort of focus and really conquer one state, leave a bit of time, set up another sales unit and organization in another state. We just went slightly crazy, and because our platform's fully digital, we were able to do that. When COVID sort of hit, you know, a little bit earlier than this time last year, I was actually out in California. I was a founder who'd sort of pretty much moved out to the US, and I was doing quite a bit of work at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. And that's when California got shut down, and we were able to kind of pivot and turn a lot of our training into ways to sort of help the healthcare workforce adapt to COVID and things like that. And then through 2020, we scaled up. You may have seen us be part of a couple of sort of marketing pushes from the DIT, including the sort of 100 healthcare companies that Hassan mentioned earlier, which we're very grateful to be included on, and a couple of others I'll mention in a second. Next slide, please. So really, you know, how did we kind of hit that trajectory of, you know, really kind of rapid growth as an early stage company of sort of, you know, just around about 2.5-3 years? Well, I think one of the most important things I want to convey to you is we really sort of spent time validating our product and made sure it worked. And this is through a lot of the work we did with Digital Health London, the NIA, and some other partners within the NHS, and also research partners in the US to get some localized data there as well. So, you know, we're essentially a learning development platform, so probably unnecessary to have, you know, deep clinical evidence like many other therapeutic digital companies have, but we kind of went down that route anyway. So we published a randomized control trial, we picked up a number of awards, we patented our system, and then we were very fortunate to be picked up by a number of big kind of publications and awards in the US, like Time magazine were included in their best inventions list of last year, and Fast Company in their most innovative companies list for this year. Next slide, please.
So Alex, if we could just maybe in the next minute wrap things up, if you wouldn't mind, and then we can get into the breakout sessions. Would that be okay? Yeah,
no problem. So Luke, if you skip ahead.
Sure. Tell me when to stop.
And you can skip this one as well.
Oh, sorry. It's typical, isn't it, when you don't want the video to start. Let me just go to this one.
Yeah, that's great. So I'll wrap up basically on this slide, which is just to say that by working with you know, a number of the people kind of on this call, and you know, one of the coolest things that happened to me last year was we just very out of the blue were featured on the NASDAQ tower in Times Square, albeit without anyone actually allowed on the streets of New York to see it, through some work we did through some of the AHSNs and the Tech Force 19 project to help carers and social workers deal with COVID-19 restrictions. And then we also were very fortunate to be asked to feature in the DIT's Great Britain campaign, which you can see in the top right there, and then pick up some other press on the back of that. So I think just to kind of, you know, wrap things up there for Louise and get things back on track, you know, my big piece of advice here is just, you know, take as many chances as you can, apply to as many things as you can, work with all the organisations on this call, and enjoy the journey. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Alex. That was very succinctly done. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, hopefully, and then I think we will now go into, I think, Neil, you're going to pull us into breakout groups.
Yeah, everyone's been randomly assigned to 3 rooms, so I'll start the rooms now, so everyone should move themselves automatically into those rooms.
Thank you.
Just bear with it for 20 seconds while it does the opening of the rooms.
Yes. So yeah, just finally, just wanted to thank everybody for their participation in this event. I'm just about to just share the screen with our contact details on. Bear with me if it comes up. It was the one that I highlighted earlier. So yeah, that should be showing. Yeah, really just to say thank you. I know we had to rush through. We were trying to answer as many questions as we possibly could, and we're about 3-4 minutes over. The evaluation will be sent out to you. I hope you've got a lot out of this event, and it's also built some new connections with you, whether you were in a solitary breakout group or a much larger group. But I think what I was hearing in our breakout group session, there's a lot of contacts to be made, particularly with ABHI. So Paul will get you on speed dial shortly. But I think it's that trying to help you all navigate and join everything up. So I think whilst I've got the AHSN contact details here, you've got contact details of the other organisations. Just come to any one of us. We coordinate incredibly closely, and so we will absolutely complement each other's expertise and capabilities and remit to support you on your journey, whether that is in the health, whether that is in the social care sectors, as we heard in our breakout group. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you all once again. Please do, if you enjoyed this event, well, provide feedback full stop, but we would like as many people to feedback as possible. This is the start of the AHSN's sort of building that momentum in our international approach. So thank you all and have a great rest of the day, and good luck with your export journey. Thanks to our speakers. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Louise.
Thank you. Thank you.